Welcome to First Gen 101, the podcast where first generation graduates share their stories and career tips. I am your host, Miguel Sanchez. In this episode, Anthony Surrat, a first gen graduate and the founder and CEO of the National Leadership Society of First Generation College Students, also known as the First Gen Society, shares his college and professional journey. He discusses the significance of mentorship, the holistic college experience, and the importance of building confidence. Anthony describes how the First Gen Society provides first gen students with resources and support. Let's listen in to this important conversation. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the First Gen 101 podcast. Today we have Anthony Surrat. Anthony, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Miguel, for having me.
I've been looking up organizations and people who are actually helping first gen students. And you are one of those people who has a story about being first gen, but also have resources that are empowering first gen students. So let's start with that. And Anthony, tell me about your high school years. Tell me of your background before you attended college.
Okay, Miguel, thank you. And, I'm happy that you're doing this topic. I think first gen, I'm very passionate about it. And it's because I'm a first gen student. My parents didn't go to college. I came from a background of lower economics, but I came from a loving home, working blue collar, working class family. I've moved many times in my childhood. People think I'm in the military, but the truth is really just when it was high. So in Jersey, born and bred. I'm now down in Texas. When I was younger, I knew that college was something that I just wanted. My first book that impacted me was The Diary of Anne Frank. And the reason I said that is because I started a journal from fifth grade on, long journal, and I call it a journal, not a diary. For those of my age who remember the show Doug, so it's a journal.
Yep, of course.
But it's an important journal because it does give me reflection on what brought me to college and what motivated me the most. And I think one of my biggest motivations was my grandmother because she was from lower economic status, but she used to always say, "Hey, if you want to go, you can go." Yeah, I had a lot of people in my life, not my family, but my life, they would say it's not possible. It's either you're an athlete or a genius, or you're not going to college. And I was able to prove that wrong.
You lived in northern New Jersey and then you moved to South Jersey. Where do you attend school?
So I attended school at New Jersey City University in Jersey City. My culture shock, I do tell this story. It was the successful first generation people I met there, like represent. At the time, there was a Hispanic president, there were Black deans, there were, minorities, other minorities that looked like me. But it was also my shock because I grew up with a family, again, that was loving, but they didn't have a college experience. So they didn't understand the true value of what college does for you, that it's not just about books. It's not just about in class. It's about the experience, the holistic experience. And that's what a lot of first generation students, they don't get that because when your parents don't go to college or other people, you don't see other people around you going to college, they have a misconception that college is just, oh, you're just reading some books. But it's so much more. While I was in school, when I was in college, I backpacked. I'd love to tell that story. When I talked about Anne Frank and the Diary of Anne Frank, I clearly remember, I think I was in fifth grade, and the last page of her book mentioned there's a museum. It was located in Amsterdam. And then I forgot. One day, I was in my 20s in college. I took my financial aid refund and I bought a plane ticket, got a backpack, and literally went backpacking. And one day in the Netherlands, and I'm walking, and I see a line of people. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking around, and I'm like, "What's that line for?" It also dawned, "Wow, this looks. Wait, where am I at?" Right? And I was completely in awe at the moment that I realized I was standing in front of the Anne Frank Museum. And I think for me, that was one of the most empowering moments of my life. And I say that because that's what college can do for you. And to me, that's part of the experience. And that little boy who read this one book, who was so inspired, that book got me to learning about reading, being able to explore more. And next thing I know, years later, I'm standing in front of where her story took place. Your question was, where did I go to school? It was in JCU, but I consider that part of where I went to school. That's where I got my undergrad and master's, but that's also where I got my experience. That's where I learned what it's like to get an education that's more than just books, but an experience in life that takes you to a different level in life.
I'm so glad you brought this up because one of the things that I tell students, first gen students especially, is that there are moments in our life that trigger and inspire us to do things that have a long term consequence or long term effect. How was that conversation of, hey, mom, dad, I'm going to college? What was their advice to you? How did your parents react to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my father, he's a hard worker. He's been a gas attendant for 20 years. Respectful job, respectful person. But the one thing about him that he's never sold me short. He would always say, if you can believe it, you can do it. And he was encouraging with just doing anything that I wanted to do. He wanted to take me to the next level of doing it. I can give you two examples that really stick out to
Please.
me. When I was in fourth grade, there was a talent show. I thought I could sing. For the record, I cannot sing.
I was going to tell you, just sing a song.
Trust me, once I start, you will say stop. I sung from Sister Act, I will follow him. And when I practiced it in front of my father, he's not the type of man to go on stage to do anything of that nature. I remember how he told me, no, 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 if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. And then we choreographed a whole dance to it. And there I am walking from one side of the stage, next side of the stage, right? And that was him, you know. Another time I did not karaoke, but lip singing for I think it was eighth grade. And it was Rockin' Robin from Michael Jackson. And then again, he choreographs this dance for me. Now, mind you, my dad he's not a dancer. He's not that type, but he is a type. He was always the type to say, you know, if you can see it, you can believe it. He's a Christian man, and he's like, have faith. He couldn't tell me how to go to college. He never was a type to say, well, apply and fast forward. None of that made sense to him. It was just more, and he never even said, how are you going to pay for college? He was just like, I said, Dad, I want to go to college. I'm going to go to college. I want to go to college because I've always said it. So he said, you're going to go to college. So that was my father. My mom, she's the same way, a little more quiet and more reserved when it comes to, say, motivation, but she never said no. But I will say, the one thing I will say about my mother in college that stood out to me was once I realized I was going to college and had to complete the FAFSA, I remember sitting in the living room, this FAFSA, and back then, well, it's a long time, was paper, right? And the paper says, what's your mom's name? What's your dad's name? What's their social security number? How much money do they make? And my mom was very reserved, like a lot of first generation parents are, because they don't understand. There's a trust issue, especially if you throw in being a minority, identify as a black male. So being a minority, sometimes those things are questioned. And even though FAFSA is there to help, there's a lot of reservation there. And I remember just going to the financial aid office saying, well, my mom's not going to give me the information. I do remember having that very honest conversation with her and saying, Mom, I really want to go to college, and this is the only way I could possibly do it is if you give me this information. And she did. And now I've spent almost 25 years in higher ed and many different fields in enrollment management. So I understand and I experience on a regular basis of students who do struggle with trying to convince their parents, especially when they're first gen, to release this information. My parents were very supportive. They just knew that when Anthony wants something, Anthony went for it.
And one of the things that I heard recently is very similar to what you're saying. And though you were a student who didn't have the resources in terms of the experience that other students had, especially with their parents, it's the confidence. It's having that confidence of saying to yourself, this is what I want to do and this is what I want to pursue. And I think this is very important for first gen students to build confidence and to have that confidence to pursue that goal. How did you end up in enrollment management?
So I got into enrollment management the same way that every person gets into enrollment management. You fall into it.
Yes.
So with me, when I was in undergrad, my personality, my character didn't change much from high school. I became the student government president. I became senior class president. I was on the board of trustees rep, right? So I networked a lot. I was out there. I had my name out there. And I remember the vice president at that time, her name was Dr. Graham, Aileen Graham, throw her name out there because she was wonderful. Strong, strong, wonderful. My senior year of college, I said, hey, graduating, I'm going to need a job. Hey, I'm graduating, need a job. I'm graduating, I'm going to need a job. I did do work study in missions. I did student assistance and within the dean of education and things of that nature. But one time I went to Dr. Graham and I said, I'm going to need a job. And so she says, well, I don't have anything. But at that time, I did start a pre-legal program at Seton Hall Law. And that summer, the VP of admissions calls me up and says, hey, I was talking to the VP of enrollment at the time, and she said you were looking for a job. I said, yes, I am. And so I started as a missions recruiter. A missions recruiter was probably one of my favorite jobs in the world because that is the job that you go out and you get in front of students and tell them, "You can go to school, you can go to college, you can make this happen." They need to hear me. They need to hear someone like me, someone who looked like them, someone who also didn't have the opportunity. And so that's why being a recruiter was awesome for me. And I moved quickly. I became an assistant director and then a director and so forth. I have to be honest, as I moved up, I actually disliked admissions a little bit more because and the management of missions is much different than being in a recruiter position. A recruiter position, you are students, and really dealing with face to face with the families. I used to explain to my recruiters, each folder is not just a folder. An application is not an application. That is a person. That is a person's hopes and dreams. And your job as a recruiter is to advocate for that student. So I want you, this is what I tell my recruiters, I want you as a recruiter to advocate for those students, why we should be accepting them. But the people who fall into it and they stay into it, it's because they realize how they're actually affecting students. So, that's my passion. First gen society now gives me that opportunity to do what I love doing as a recruiter. Now I can say, hey, what is it that I was missing when I was a college student? Because when I was a college student, I always felt like it was something I didn't know. Like it just seemed like everyone knew something I didn't know. And I think what First Gen Society does is brings these students together, connects them with a resource with different administrators and advisors, and through our service pillars, it helps them understand to ask the questions that they didn't know to ask. I think that's why it's really important that we are intentional when we're dealing with first generation students because we can't just say ask questions, get questions. You got to tell them what questions they should be asking.
You mentioned the First Gen Society, and so let's jump to that topic. At what point did you decide to start the society? What were some of the challenges?
So the first society started once I graduated and as I'm working in admission, working with students, there was a realization that where are the students who are first gen? How are they connecting with each other? I used to have students come in all the time and they'll say, well, how did I know about this event? Or, you know, I feel lonely. I used to feel lonely. I used to feel like it was no one else like me. Again, like I said, it was that I felt like people knew something that I didn't know. The first gen experience, it is a unique experience. It's unique, but it's a common experience. And I think being together was what was is what I was looking for. The other thing that I notice is that I keep hearing in different meetings and different universities, institutions, oh, we need to focus on the first gen students. We need to focus on the first gen students. So all the schools seem to be saying it, but they were all doing it a little bit differently. There's no best practice. It just wasn't intentional. With first gen society, it was really just the idea of just, hey, well, what is it that we didn't have? And let's create that. Now, how do we do it? We actually started by let's create a website and let's see where that brings us. And the amazing thing is that we didn't market first gen society. We never put it out there. We never put marketing out there. Schools came to us, students came to us because they said, well, this is what we're looking for. Now, how do we have it on our campus? So we serve students, we serve both students and chapters. If you're an individual student, you can sign up at firstgensociety.org and then go through our leadership pillars and earn your digital badges. Or even better yet, if you're a university, you can create a chapter on your campus so you can serve multiple students, more students at once, bring community together because it is about community, it's about representation, it's about being a group. I mentioned our service pillars, and the reason they're important is because they're very specific. There's 5 service pillars we have students work on. A few of them, and my favorite ones, is like it's service to self. Service to self is important. That's your opportunity to work on yourself, your mental health, your mental well-being. It's the opportunity to make a resume. It's your opportunity to start a club or do something that's just something for you, right? The second one, I actually didn't realize that students would engage with the most, but I think what they relate to the most is this one is service to family. And service to family is just a reminder that you might be the first to get to college, but you didn't get there alone. It was your auntie, it was your grandmother, it was your father or your mother, your brother. How do you now get back to them? Some of the examples, maybe it's, your little cousin who, because you're the person in college, you're actually going to do a college tour with them. But then there's other ones, service a chapter, which might be recruiting students and other first-gen students identify and bring them in. Service to your community, which is giving back.
Two things that came up that I think are really important to highlight. The first is this idea of gratitude, going with your cousin on a campus visit. It's a way of showing gratitude. My nephews are first gen, and I never took them on a campus tour or a trip, which now I'm like, that's one of the things that I should have done. But little things like that are ways that you're already making a difference without even finishing school or attaining that degree yet. So I'm so happy to hear those acts of gratitude. And then second, having this plan to own your education. And so on that note of owning your education, one of the things that I notice about first gen students is, at least the ones I've met, a lot of them don't have a clear career path. Do you think it's a lack of networking? Is it the lack of confidence? How can we help students get the jobs that they want after college?
If you're coming from a blue collar family, let's say you're coming from, and I want to preface this first and now go back to the statement. When I say education, because I believe in education, education's not necessarily just college. It could be anything from certifications and other things. It's not just college itself. But if you're coming from, say, a blue collar family, like say, you're a electrician, or if your father was a plumber or so forth, phenomenal jobs. But I think what's interesting with that is that you have a very clear cut. These are things I have to do to get certified, join this union to get to that field. What happens with students, first gen or not, honestly, is that they are 18, 17, 16 years old and they say, I'm going to be a psychologist or I'm going to be a movie star. What's important is that you find a mentor on campus, a professor or an advisor. If you walk up to almost any professional in college and say, "Hey, would you mind mentoring me?" Now, the reason I think that's important is because that will help them guide you into the right major. But back to your original question, what do you tell students to, how do you direct students to take the course that they need to be exactly what they want to be? I say, if you want to be a psychiatrist or if you want to be a journalist, find a journalist, talk to them, speak to your advisor from the very beginning, start early, then just look at what does it take to get that degree. Look at job description because what's interesting about job descriptions is they tell you what's required.
No, that's great advice. One of the things that I think about regularly is students have all this pressure to do and to excel, but they have no support. One of the key things to remember is to find that mentor who's going to shepherd you, basically help you through college. Really make that a priority. Again, to those who are listening, and if you're in high school or if you're just starting college, make sure you find that mentor. So, in through the first gen society, what are some of the challenges up ahead? What are some things that need to change not only structurally, but also individually? How should students look at education? How should colleges, especially as we enter a new era in how education is perceived, what are the biggest challenges out there?
So many challenges, and I think AI, for one, is just a
Wow. Okay.
huge challenge. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I really grew my life with follow your passion, do what you love to do, and someone will pay you to do it. I don't know if I feel the same way now. And
Mm.
unfortunately, I don't have that answer, and I'm not that expert to come with the answer because AI is going to absolutely just change the dynamics in the world. It's already doing it, right? I think the second challenge is that the majority of students coming in are first gen. And the one advice I will tell first gen students is this is something I messed up on. They want the quickest thing. What can I get fast? And I think that you run into problems that way because then you end up older and you're not actually doing what you want to do. I received my master's in national security and cybersecurity. And the reason I did that degree was because I had a presentation from someone from that department, and they said, "Yeah, it's the only master's degree that you can do in 2 years and come out and make $100,000 worth," right? And so me and some other missions counsel at the time, and we were just like, "Yeah, let's just do that because in 2 years, make $100,000." And it made sense to me, I guess, because it was quick, right? So the funny thing, I get the master's degree, and I go to my professor, chair of the department, and I'm like, "Okay, so I got my degree. Where's my $100,000? Like, what do I have to do?" And then he breaks out the the government pay scale, and at that point, it was already assistant director of missions or something like that, and I remember him showing me the pay scale, and I was already making way more than what it was at. I'm not even close under. Do your research. Don't rush. The last thing I will say, and this is the challenge, and I think it's extremely important, it is the responsibility of a university to graduate the students that they accept. You do
Okay.
not accept students that are academically not prepared to graduate if you do not give them the resources to prepare them. And I'm passionate about that, especially I know you work in the missions world. Sometimes it gets to become a numbers game, and we have to be very careful. Every folder is a person's hopes and dreams, but not every folder is the appropriate folder for that school. So I tell all students, any student that I'm talking to in high school is one, apply to your community college first. Your community college, because that way you know that's your gateway to getting your education. And you also apply to the universities that you want to apply to. But as from an administrator, you can't look at students as money. You can't look at students as just numbers. You have to look at them as an individual, and they have to be able to succeed in your university.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'll have the web link to First Gen Society so that anyone who's listening right now can check it out. It's a great website, has lots of resources. I like how you lay out the plan for first gen students and how to think about financial aid and classes, etc. You mentioned pivotal was Anne Frank for you and her journal. If you can write a book today about your experience, what would you title it?
Okay, so I'm laughing because that's one of my interview questions I ask when I hire staff all the time. Write a book about yourself, what would you call it? I have all these little tidbits of life lessons, just experiences I've gone through. And when my grandmother, she passed, it was 2018, so I was older, but she was so pivotal and so awesome woman who just had all these great lessons. And what I've learned is that through her lessons that she's taught me and also my life experiences, and that's kind of what makes me who I am. So it has to do with something with my grandmother because I credit her for a lot of who I am because she taught me faith. She had a strong Christian background, but she was a woman who I think she was married at 15 and had 4 or 5 kids by the time she was 19. She picked cotton, but then she bought and owned and homes in Camden, New Jersey, like the whole street. Like, she was a real estate woman. So she was self-made and she really had this wisdom and glow about her that resonates in me. If I wrote a book about myself, it would have to be something about my grandmother and the warriors because again, I am because of her. She helped build and made me. And then she told me a story about someone wanted to go to college and they didn't know how they were going to pay for it. But then when they went, it was already paid for. So I think deep down in my head as a kid, I was like, to college because she's going to pay for it. I'm going to pay for it. But what she was teaching me is that it's all about faith. If you believe it, you can make it happen. I have transcendent economic status in my life due to college. I would like to just at least say my favorite quote because I do say it
Please.
often, and it is what you put into it, what you get out of it. It's extremely important that, people understand that nothing's given to you for free. You got to work for it. But if you work for it, it will return. You'll get that return.
Anthony, thank you. I think there was no other way to end the episode. I want to make sure that people stay with that thought and own that, which I think is really important. How can people learn more about the First Gen Society?
Absolutely. The best way is firstgensociety.org. All of there is laid out.
Thank you for being here today, Anthony.
Well, thank you, Miguel, and I really appreciate it. And I strongly appreciate what you do. I watched your other podcasts, and we need more. We need more voices like yours of just getting this information out there and just helping students where we can and meeting people where they are. And that's what you're doing. And I appreciate you for doing it. So thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Like, share, and subscribe to the podcast.